What about in the medical context? Like, I haven't been to a doctor since COVID. What do we do?
This is a really hard problem that I don't have all the answers for. I can recommend that you try to find a physician. Certainly, I mean, the bare minimum, find a physician that respects the doctrine of informed consent, meaning they're willing to give you accurate and clear information. They're willing to answer all of your questions. They don't roll their eyes when you ask reasonable questions. They take your concerns and your questions seriously. You may not see eye to eye on everything. They may recommend something that you want to decline. That's fine. But find those physicians that still respect informed consent, that don't badger, pressure, try to humiliate you because you say no to something that they think you ought to do. There are colleagues of ours in medicine that have started new initiatives, like the Wellness Company is one that I could mention. I'm not affiliated with them. I have no financial interest, conflict of interest there, but I think they're trying to set up an alternative method of more holistic healthcare services and healthcare delivery and healthcare information sharing. So there is a new sort of parallel economy that's starting to percolate up, but I think these things will take time. But I can mention the Wellness Company as one good initiative that I've seen take off in recent years. And I believe they have telemedicine services if you're not located near one of their clinics. But I'm really worried about medical training. I had lunch the other day with a former student at UC Irvine, who was literally the top student in the class, who was sort of blackballed for entirely non-academic reasons, ideological reasons, and amazingly did not match. This was the very best student in the class. So ideology has so overtaken so many medical schools, unfortunately, that a sort of merit-based system has given way in many instances to a system where if you shut your mouth and go along with the ideology of the day, then you will advance. And if you don't, no matter how skilled you are, no matter how good you are, no matter what kind of physician you would make, you can be punished severely. And I think that should be an extremely worrisome trend to anyone who someday, all of us someday will probably be needing a physician's care. I think we're starting to see some cracks in that edifice. Things in gender affirmative care, that whole house of cards is really starting to collapse. I've been watching that issue for the last 10 years. Actually, and I would say the last month is the first time that we've seen major pivots and major turning points on that issue with the publication of the so-called WPATH files, which my friend Michael Schellenberger and Mia Hughes released a few weeks ago. And the CAST report was commissioned by the National Health Service in England. These two recent publications have really exposed gender affirmative care for the abusive kind of quackery that it is. And this will go down in medical history, in the same category as frontal lobotomies and the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. I mean, it's been a medically disastrous enterprise that was never evidence-based, and it should be very clear to anyone willing to look at the evidence now that that's the case. So we're seeing gender clinics shutting down, especially overseas. I think the United States is going to take longer before we start seeing that. But that, these changes are happening. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. People should know that, courageous pushback will eventually have an effect. Medicine can't continue along its current course forever. I mean, the public will just not stand for it. The public everyone is vulnerable to illness, right? Most people, when they go see a physician, it's against their preference, right? It may not be against their will, but it's certainly against their preference. I mean, who wants to go see a doctor, right? We do it because illness makes us vulnerable. And we do it because, in many cases, the doctor is the one who has the means at his or her disposal to try to help us, to try to cure us. If you have appendicitis, you probably need to go under the knife and get that thing out before it ruptures and kills you. And so you got to be able to trust surgeons to some extent. And so I think the public will not long stand for the licensing and graduating of mediocre and incompetent or ideologically driven physicians. But that trend could continue long enough that it certainly does a lot of damage to the medical profession, and worse than that, doing damage to patients that rely on the medical profession. But I think that we should remember that in certain ideologically driven areas of medicine, public health, and so forth, we have seen positive developments in the last year or two. There are some very good new initiatives underway that are sort of growing out of or being built on the ruins of medical and other institutions that have utterly failed us and have utterly, betrayed the trust of the public. So I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist, but I'm always a person with hope, because human ingenuity and human creativity has, shown that we have the capacity for societal and cultural and institutional renewal. And so for me, it's an exciting time. It's kind of a scary time, when it comes to some of the stuff that we've talked about today, but it's also an exciting time to get involved in these fights and, talk to people, share information with family and friends. Some of them will be close to it and they won't want to hear it. Others will be open to it. And, bit by bit, people come around, and that has an effect on society and culture. We have to win in the courts, but we have to win in the court of public opinion. The courts, right or wrong, the courts are influenced by the court of public opinion. These are human beings at the end of the day. The judges are not you'd like to think of them as totally dispassionate, just applying the law to the particular case. But everyone involved in the legal profession knows that the human elements are very, very present in all of this. And so it does matter if the public has realized what is going on, is really not happy about this whole censorship regime. That will force the judges to really look at the evidentiary record and pay attention to it and take cases like this seriously. So I think all of us have a role to play, and no one should feel powerless.